All right, we are back here in the park under the pagoda. It's a good spot, so we had to come back. We got some trumpeteering going on in the distance, but I hope it doesn't disturb the audio situation we have going on right now. Today we're here to talk. What are we here to talk about today?
We're talking about something like, I think it's pretty formal, like culture adaptability.
Okay.
So
less Chinese specific today. Applicable, of course, to one's life here in China, but this is kind of a universal, if you will, topic which could be applied wherever abroad you may find yourself, or even within your own country if you're in more of an unfamiliar situation. But we are going to use this idea of adaptability, cultural adaptability, specifically to, actually being completely out of your own comfort zone and what you are used to, and how you can become comfortable while you are in that type of situation.
yes. So we're actually about to start to. I think we need to start talking about just try to define this concept a little bit. So I probably would start with asking you first, because apparently you are being travel like those places more than I do. So also I feel like you are actually just practicing this as like
literally every second of
your
the
life.
past 5 or 6 years of my life.
Okay.
Yeah, I think obviously the word adapt or adaptability is your ability to adjust to the circumstances of the situation you're in, right? And so we talk about this idea of cultural adaptability. That brings it more to the idea of you find yourself in the word culture is very overused and not really, it's misunderstood exactly what it means. So, but for lack of a better term, a new culture. So a new setting where there's new language, new people, new customs. They do things differently. You don't really understand. So cultural adaptability, I would say, is your ability to adjust to being in a new culture and being comfortable. And this is one step for starting to change your behavior in a really massive way, but adaptability in the sense that you can make these small tweaks to which you are comfortable, you can survive, you can function in a basic way, but it is not yet necessarily reaching what the term I like to use more like assimilation, right? Where you start to change your behaviors and the patterns of how you act and think, right? So it's one step before that. So I would say it's adjust, adapt, and then assimilate are kind of the levels. You first arrive, you adjust, you got to survive. Adapt is now we're slowly starting to change your behaviors in a small way, right? To add a higher level of specifically mental comfort to your new existence in this new place that you find yourself. That's what I see to be cultural adaptability.
Okay. So yeah, I mean it's you actually give like a very good start, and also I feel like a lot of the concepts as you mentioned before, like the adaptation, the assimilation, and also the maybe I missed one, but yeah, those three concepts we probably
adjust, adapt, assimilate.
Adjust, adapt, assimilate. Yeah, those three concepts will actually maybe will become separate episode, but yeah, hopefully we can wrap them up in a.
I think that breakdown is something in the future
Yeah.
I'd like to go into, but right now we're going to stick to the adaptability because it is more of a general term. But again, I wanted to I think there's steps to it, there's levels. Mm-hmm. And so you can use this term cultural adaptability to describe the entire arc of what I just talked about. Mm-hmm. But I'll say I see the adaptability as kind of, again, that intermediate mode. But we'll talk about it kind of at large today and in general, and I don't know, you're going to lead kind of exactly what we're going to talk about within it, but It'll be within the realm of this idea of cultural adaptability.
Okay, so you ready with the kind of like a bunch of like pretty intense questions?
Pretty intense questions.
Maybe and compared to those we had before.
Interesting.
A little bit intense.
Okay, let's see. What do you?
Maybe for you it's not. Okay,
let's see.
The first will be we speak of the adaptations or adaptability. So I feel also like. Maybe you can just recall some of your past experience. So like you travel to different countries, and I mean some of them like feel like you can use English, but also some of those, as you mentioned, like Nepal or something, you also been you also being thrown into kind of like entirely new environment. I think that's when like you sense like culture adaptability will become much more important, which is even more important than knowing the language itself. Because I feel like sometimes, I mean, for me, I feel like if you're talking about the cultural adaptability, I will sure prioritize the language first. So, which means, it will come to the conclusion. Maybe it's not the right one. It's like, oh, if you really want to adapt to the local culture, first you need to learn at least a little bit more about their language or dialect first. But but also like since we've been travel like to the different region of China, even if I feel like for me like a Mandarin, of course my native language, I feel like I feel like I should be more confident than you do to like be more like adapted to the local culture there. But now I feel like it's not correct. So that's why I come up to this question I want to ask you. Do you feel like there will be something so for defining cultural adaptability? Do you think there is something more than just knowing the ability to knowing the local language?
I think the language is a very, very small part of it, and I would say it's not even that important. So I think what you were kind of saying is, for example, when we're in Qingdao, right?
Yeah.
Or when we're in these other parts of China, which we are still in your country. However, background for people who may not understand, like the absolute grand diversity of what China is, right? And like really the provinces are almost like different countries. There's different dialects, different food, different culture. It's so big. They might say, well, it's all China. You should be super comfortable. Aren't you still in your own country? It's still very different. But I think kind of what you're saying is, and this is something, it's one of the best compliments I can get wherever I am, is that when I'm with someone who is from the country in which we are walking about, and you kind of, whether you say it verbal to me or you were saying it almost retroactively, like it's almost like I was more comfortable than you were in these situations.
Exactly.
I mean, I owe a lot of it to just pure repetition of, again, like 6 years of just being in different corners of the world and purposely putting myself into extremely uncomfortable situations. And I think I've done it a lot of the time. I think I've purposely done it for the sake of trying to develop this ability where, again, when Jack was here, we talked to him about like this idea of you could drop the two of us anywhere, like not the two of us together, but as if we were alone, and like heart rate does not change. And again, yeah, I think a lot of it is repetition. And so when you said language, yeah, I think that's a very, very small part of it.
Yeah, cause sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I feel like the language. Why before my assumption would be the language would be the first priority to actually become a person who have the cultural adaptability stuff, because I feel like a lot of time if you really want to adapt the local culture, the first thing to do you have to like. I also understand you have to observe, but also later it will definitely leads to the action where you want to communicate with them to learn about their custom or learn about how just how do they do in their
language is a vehicle that allows you to go
exactly.
deeper.
That's why.
So like I didn't learn Mandarin because I enjoy languages. I sitting down with the language textbook and doing the vocab, like a lot of people who they self-identify as polyglots and they love learning languages, like they really enjoy that process.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy the process of learning the language, but I'm doing it because I know it allows me to go deeper and do the stuff I actually do enjoy. And so like on that same note, I feel like you've probably met a lot of foreigners who speak Mandarin far better than me.
Exactly.
But you probably feel that like I understand you guys more, or
exactly.
I can relate to you more, and like I understand the Chinese mindset more,
yeah.
even though they speak the language far more fluent than me, right?
Exactly.
So the language can, at least understanding the language can be a prerequisite to going deeper, but you knowing the language does not mean that you like really click with the people as much as you eventually can if you really focus on that, right? Because when I'm sitting in a conversation, when another foreigner who's really focused on improving their Mandarin sitting in a conversation, they're listening to the tone, how you said it. Oh, this is a new word. I'm sitting there and like, what I geek out about is really trying to understand the person, right? It's less about the language and like studying the language and the new words or the whatever. It's I want to understand how you guys think and perceive the world around you. And so I think that being my focus for pretty much everything I do is what allows me to get to the level where I if you are handing me that compliment, I appreciate and I am taking it. So yeah, I think it's repetition and focus on it through that repetition. It's not something, I was going to say it's not something that you're going to develop naturally. However, you absolutely will if you spend, again, when Jack was here, we talked about this metric of, I think I said something along the lines of hours in extremely uncomfortable situations in faraway places is like the best metric of like someone who is kind of traveled a lot and really put themselves out there. It's not about how many countries you've been to or whatever. So I think that's what it is. It's just the putting in the hours of just sitting in these absolutely bizarre situations to the point where there's not going to be any situation where you just are like really get anxious or whatever. And I think kind of what I'm talking about when it pertains to, again, we're talking about cultural adaptability today. It's this idea of like unfazedness, right? Like not getting, that's one part of it. Now there's also, and I think kind of the breakdown of what we want to do with our whole chameleon thing we have going on is there is these mindset shifts that you can take to understand. It's almost, I like to say, it's like looking at the nature of the reality of it. Like a lot of these barriers that you put up are all in your head. They don't actually exist. But then there's also the practical cultural knowledge, right? So you put yourself in a mindset where all is well, like I'm not going to be fazed, like people really aren't as different as I'm perceiving them to be. But then there's also specific cultural knowledge that you need to understand, and whether you are in China, whether you're in Russia, India, whatever, you need to understand there's specific things they do. So this repetition that brings you to the sense of unfazedness, I think, is more the mindset part. Now, the more like technical aspect of cultural adaptability is understanding things we've talked about, mianzi, renqing, like these specific things for Chinese culture, those specific aspects. But like I said, the mindset part of it all is something that I feel like can be applied to wherever you may find yourself. So again, we're still defining cultural adaptability again. I think you can break it up into these two buckets, or at least I personally do.
Well said. I mean, it's actually, for me, I'm really like, it's before I was just throw the question, but now I feel like it's really something I can learn a lot from you. Because when you're talking about things, it reminds me like our path of like just leads to the become like a person who actually have the cultural adaptability. It's probably the reverse one, because you actually use the you start with the experience. So before you learn Mandarin, probably you already. So as you say, the language for you is the vehicle. So before you first experience, you try to.
And that's why we've gotten to the point where I've spent so much time in this country and I still speak far from perfectly. It's because it's not what I'm worried about or putting the time into or focusing. I absolutely should. I still need to improve the level of Mandarin. There's a lot of issues that we're not going to go into details with my language skills, but it's because my focus has been understanding you all as like a people and how you just think so fundamentally different than me or where I am from or the people of where I am from. And so that's what I focus on, right? Mm-hmm. It's less about the words or the tones or what have you, the technical aspects of the language. I'm worried about how do I understand you. So yeah, I agree. It's a vehicle, and you shouldn't go into a situation where I have a new expat assignment in Moscow, so I'm going to learn Russian. And once I learn Russian, I'm set. Like, not at all. You're going to go deeper than someone who hasn't learned Russian, but you just need to put in the hours in just these situations where you just admittedly do not understand what's going on. And once you just continually do that, that's when you're going to develop this sense of adaptability. Be comfortable in any situation that may arise. You're not going to achieve that just by being able to speak the language, which I think conversations from, so ABCs, right? American-born Chinese, for those who don't know. So this is someone who, their parents grew up in China, moved to the U.S., grew up in a rather culturally Chinese household, but they're still super American. A lot of people sometimes use the term whitewashed, ABCs, this idea that it's like they grew up in a very American setting, but they still have these cultural roots, so they might have spoken the language at home, they understand a little bit. But as you know, if an ABC comes here, they look like you guys, they might be able to speak Mandarin, but you know the second you start talking to them, they are not Chinese.
Yeah, and also we have like a very vivid metaphor for those people. We call them like banana person. Like you're sorry, it might.
No, go ahead.
No offense, it's not racist.
I didn't say it. You said it.
Yeah. It's just because it's like their appearance. It's like very Chinese or Asian, but at the bottom of their heart or their mindset is like a super American, which is white. But yeah, sorry, it's not very sketchy, but yeah. But I think you can get the idea about that. But for me, like as we talked before, like because the thing is what I learned from you, this is before like my path of gaining sensing their cultural adaptability. You see why my priority is the language before, because like for me, like obviously I input much more time in English than you do in Mandarin, because it's one of our major subjects. I feel like we're being at least like put a lot of time in study another foreign language. So technically, we're more able to all our people are more able to like, if according to my old theory, would be like, oh, she'll be able to blend into local culture. Which it helps, but it turns out like when I remember the first time when we go to Europe, actually we are those pretty like students from the top tier high school. We all have a really good level of English at the time compared to the other peers. We actually feel very confident when we get to the Europe on the first day. But later on, when we're like the second day, it's like
you realize you have no idea what's going on.
Because the thing is, when you're in Shanghai, we are actually very international, as you say, it's international environment. But we feel like, oh yeah, we can just have like a chit chat with like a random foreigner on the street, and that make us feel like, oh, we're able to like somehow just we notice people, because the ability to be able to like communicate with those foreigners give us the illusion that we definitely can fit into their culture. So the things happen. The first time it's my first time like being abroad, like 16, with all the other of my classmates be there. The second day is like we feel like, I mean, even if a lot of the other classmates they've been traveled a lot in the world, but apparently their parents also like it's like a very traditional Chinese tourism. We all feel like we're disconnected with the people in there. It's the first start was that we're being stared at all the Germans on the public transportation, which is fine because we know like there are not many Asians there, which feel like, because in the Shanghai it's the opposite. Normally it's like we do the foreigner watch, but now it's like okay. And the second is the way we understand being so it's also, then I realized the mindset. So sometimes we want to show like we are being polite, we're good kids, but it turns out sometimes we're being rude, and we just don't know why. And also like I feel like we feel like we're a super person, but when we be there, we try to use our way, because it normally works when we hang out with the foreigners in Shanghai, but it turns out it's just like they just can't get it, and we feel like we're being trapped in our own like the social bubbles.
Well, I think that's so. For those not familiar, Chinese, especially in this part of the world, but you will see it sometimes in Europe as well, are very infamous for the way they like to travel. Is there will be a tour that is completely organized from departure flight from your home city to return, and you're always on a tour bus, and you're always in a group of 30 to 40 to 50 Chinese people. And so I know this is not developing cultural adaptability is not necessarily the purpose of their trip, but it's impossible to just to develop that when you're in that sort of setting. In a similar way, a lot of American study abroad programs, whether it's your home university or it's a third party who brings students from other universities together, regardless, you're essentially all American. And a lot of the time what will happen, and I am guilty of this pretty much my first year of living abroad in a few different cities, was I pretty much only hung out with other Americans, right? And I don't care that you are in another country or you're in another part of the world. It's less about where you are physically, and it is more about who do you interact with. And if you're only interacting with people who are from the world that you're from, and you're not stepping in, even though you're physically in this new world, right? If I say you're in Europe or you're like, being in China is like another world. It's another world, right? You're in this new world, but you're only interacting with the people in the world that you're from. You're not actually experiencing this you're physically in this new world, but you're not pushing your understanding of what life is like here, how these people think. So yeah, I think, again, it's not the purpose of what these Chinese do when they go on group trips, but like you're saying, it was the group of Chinese students in Germany. I know you also eventually did a homestay, right? Which is a little more.
But for me, like, I mean, it's something like, for me, if it's the first time like traveling abroad, so what I expected would be more like chill, because we are hanging out with, because
foreigners are super chill. Super chill.
We will hang out with our own people. But the next day, but we're all staying there, which is fine. I'm saying, oh yeah, we're staying with the foreigners. But still, I'm at that point. I was still thinking about, we're staying with the foreigners. Remember, the foreigners in my contact will be so I was still like trapped into my social pattern will be. It's like the way you hang out with a foreigner in Shanghai, which I feel I'm much more comfortable with. But the thing is, when you're actually thrown into that the environment.
Additionally, these foreigners that you interact with in Shanghai, and I think we've not necessarily talked about this on camera, but like, I'm from the United States. I am American. However, I spent a lot of time away, right? And since I personally have developed this sense of cultural adaptability, you're naturally going to have an easier time getting along with me, because I'm already making these adjustments to interact with you and put us on the same plane to be able to really communicate. Whereas you, right? Not you, because you have traveled a bunch. But let's say a Chinese person who's never really left or experienced that much abroad, and an American who's never really experienced, they're going to have a really hard time seeing eye to eye. So what I'm saying is, these foreigners that you interacted with in Shanghai before you went abroad, and you were like, it's cool. It's because they have developed skills to be able to come to a level in which you see eye to eye. Now, when you're going to Germany, where these Germans who perhaps have actually never left the country, they are a lot less able to do that, which is why I feel very lucky that you and I are being born into a generation in which our generation, anywhere in the world, one, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's gotta be over 80, 90%.
Yeah.
We're growing up speaking the same language. It's not, for all of us, it's not our mother language, but we all have a vast majority of us have a common language, right? And so I've always had the best experiences with friendships or interactions. It's with, not necessarily with, I'm sitting down in, it's not that these aren't amazing friendships as well. It's that the ability to really like understand each other is when us, for example, I am someone who's spent a lot of time and effort trying to understand Chinese people. You've spent a lot of time and effort trying to understand Western culture, maybe even American culture in general. That's why we can get along very well and really see eye to eye. However, if you're going to be speaking to an American who's never really left and has no interest in the outside world, or an American who's traveling and is talking to a Chinese, when I'm in China and talking to someone who's not really interested in the Western world, it's a lot more difficult to like really feel close and understand each other. Which is why, again, this cultural adaptability thing is a two-way street, right? But you can't expect everyone in your host country to have an interest in your culture. So you need to be able to, right? Imagine there's a bridge, right? And this is a metaphor I like to use a lot to kind of describe this. Is you're on one side of the bridge and the other person on the other. if someone hasn't really made any effort to learn the other person's culture or to learn how to interact with them, you guys are both on the far ends of this bridge and there's traffic going over and it's really loud and you're trying to scream to each other to communicate with each other. That's not going to work, right? Now, if we're speaking to, say, Americans in general, or let's say Westerners who speak English as a mother language, you're very lucky because a lot of the world is learning your mother language, right? So even if you make no effort to try to understand the host culture that you're going into, you're still standing on your end of the bridge. You haven't walked any closer, but they're coming closer to you. Does that make sense? Now, where the best communication happens is when both parties walk to the middle of the bridge. Then you're standing face to face and you can talk so much more clearly. Does that make sense? Right? Like, it's a two-way street. You both need to make the effort. However, again, what's would be really important is you need to be prepared that the vast majority of people you're going to interact with do not make that effort. So you need to be the one to go to the middle of the bridge to at least close the gap a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like that's why I bring my own experience up, because I feel like I do feel like, so at first 3 days we struggle, even if we hang out with the kids and go to school with them, even if they have all the poster about like the Chinese Culture Week or whatever stuff, we still feel like we are not making the exact same amount of the effort try to get closer to them. I mean, on the culture break that you mentioned. But I think the turning point started when it's like the 4th or 5th day, we started to really hang out with them. Agree to like, I feel like you're right. If you really want to just like try to like start to cross the bridge, I think you have to start to just break the old mindset, which is you're just seeing those people as like from the as the outsiders. I say, oh, they're just foreigners, and as long as I know their language, we just communicate and just see how it goes. I feel like you should go more beyond that, which is you started to, because you already have the vehicles. Now just try to like interact them as if they're not saying your people, but just go naturally. Just act like how do you make new friends with in your hometown or whatever saying.
Well, you said this idea of like the foreigner, right? Mm-hmm. So the other, and I'm not about to go into like a liberal academia diatribe about othering.
Yeah.
But I mean it more from the psychological perspective.
Exactly.
If you view them as different than you, they are the foreigner. They are the other. They are not like you. They are from a different place, which factually they are, right? And look, at the end of the reason we do it is because you can classify people as they're from this country. Mm-hmm. They speak this language.
Yeah.
They are of these people, of this culture, right? But if you do that, if you're not able to remove that, it's far more difficult to. I don't talk to someone here and I'm like that, like view them as a Chinese person. They're just people. We're all just people, and the sooner you can get that through your head, mm-hmm. the sooner this adaptability thing is gonna become easier for you. But if you keep in your head like these people are different than me, they're other, then they are gonna be other, because however you view the situation is how it is, and you need to really be conscious that you have a lot of control over how you view a situation. It's the adaptability thing is a mind game 100%. Yeah. It's less about, again, like you were saying, the language or the can I use chopsticks or whatever. It's like less about the outside stuff. It's more about how you perceive the situation
exactly.
at hand. Yeah.
I feel like it's like that, and also, yeah, I mean, actually that day we were actually like just have like a football game with those girls in their school. I feel like after that, we start to take off the maybe before we just label them as Germans or whatever Germans, some things like foreigners, but from that day off, later we hang out that we're more like we're swimming the lake and whatever the town. in their town, I feel like yes, we are interacting with the real people.
You're just high school girls hanging out. You're not
Yes.
Chinese, German. You know, it's less of that divide. Whereas the
Yeah.
more time you spend together, the more time you actively are trying to break down this mental barrier that you see that doesn't
Yes,
actually exist.
exactly.
You see it, it does not exist, does not exist in physical reality. It is all 100% how you view the situation.
Yes.
Then the more it's going to get to the point where you're just hanging out and having a good time with other girls, not this group of German girls, and we are not German girls.
Exactly.
Right.
And also, I feel like there's one thing I learned about old experience with hanging out with those people is like, so before why we feel struggled. So before, like every time we sense there any difference, like the way they hang out with each other, maybe they go to the pub or they just the way they cheer for just spending their summer life, it's so different from we do in Shanghai.
Right.
So at first I feel bad because the moment we feel like they're anything like just different from ours, we start to bring up, oh, they're foreigners. There's not gonna be a way we hang out with them. How should we do that? Oh, maybe it's the cultural difference. Then we start to remind us again and again. Then we start to lose control of how we're going to cross the bridge or try to get closer to them. So then, I still remember last time when I talked with Paige, and I actually pretty agree with what she said at the last minute. It's like you have to be open to the
Openness to experience.
Yes, say yes.
That's another thing that
Exactly.
is super critical to cultural adaptability, is
Yes.
one's openness to experience,
Exactly.
which is a widely used psychological metric because it is so critical to other aspects of life, and your ability to adapt specifically in this cultural adaptation
Exactly.
scenario. Openness to experience is super important, and those who have high openness to experience ratings
Yeah.
or test high on these psychological exams or tests that measure that are far more able to develop what we are labeling as cultural adaptability. Openness to experience is, I would say, actually probably the most important part.
Yeah.
If you're not open to it, openness to experience is a prerequisite for really developing a high level of cultural adaptability, period.
I agree with that.
Openness to experience is critical,
Yes.
right? Like if we're in Qingdao, right? And like we see the situation where we can go chill with the boys on the beach and I can tan in my underwear, but I am, as a person, don't have a high openness to experience, which I think being able to chill with 70-year-old men who grew up on the other side of the globe with me in our underwear under the sun, speaking a different language, requires a high level of openness to experience. And if I don't have that,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do that. And I'm not saying everyone has to go. Not everyone has to go try to tan themselves until they're
Yeah.
black with Chinese uncles in their underwear. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's an extreme example that, yeah, openness to experience. I don't. I couldn't overstate it. Like it's really critical. It is more of a prerequisite. One who has high openness to experience versus one who has low openness to experience but a very high ability to learn a new language. The one who has openness to experience but doesn't develop the language skills, I feel like could go further in a cultural adaptability sense than one who can just simply master a language.
100%.
Openness to experience is more critical than the language.
Yes, because the thing is also like, sorry, I have to use my past high school German trip as because probably it's the very like a classic example for people.
Well, also it's your first experience too, so that's like the most.
Surrounding the local people, yeah. So I remember there's a boy who's actually one of our, as you said, why is the language will not be the, this doesn't have to be necessarily be the prerequisite for that, because that when we start to be open to say yes to their invites to just hang out with them in their way, like swimming the lake. I mean, for Shanghainese, I bet like for us it's like what we saw swimming should be like a fancy place, like
in an Olympic pool with chlorine, and you have all the beach chairs on the side.
Yeah, your parents or friends waiting with the fresh cut up fruits.
Less of a lake with mosquitoes and yada yada.
Yeah, it should be super comfort, nice place, and somehow like can mix up with some hot spring or hot tub place.
Right.
So back to topic. So invited to the swimming things. I think like some of our people like just quit. Because when they hear that,
they were just so nervous about
they're
whatever
annoyed.
it could be. Annoyed.
Because I mean, there are apparently some kids who are from very wealthy family and they're Shanghainese. I'm not saying they're a bad person, but they just feel like, as I've said, maybe they're in Shanghai, they're pretty open to the Western culture. I mean, they pretty love it. But things turn out when you're actually being thrown into like totally a strange environment, which you are the foreigners.
Which is a humbling experience, and until you experience that and you are the foreigner, because again, before I did travel and started to understand a lot of this stuff, I grew up in relatively rural America, United States, okay? And it's a bubble. It's a bubble. We do not understand the outside world, and the way you view foreigners and the way you view perhaps someone who doesn't speak English fluently, right? Mm-hmm. Until you are that person, you don't get it.
Exactly.
The first experience of being completely fish out of water, I don't know what's going on, I'm trying to speak this language, but I still don't speak it well, and I feel like an absolute idiot, is when it starts to click for you. And that moment will specifically start to develop another topic we'll talk about another time, cultural empathy.
Yeah.
Which is something we'll go into deeper. But that first click you have of just like, I feel like an idiot. Mm-hmm. I'm a foreigner. I don't belong here. That's the moment that it's the low point, right? Mm-hmm. On the journey. It's just this point. It's just you feel hopeless.
Exactly.
And that's a super important, humbling moment to have. Again, more so to develop the cultural empathy, but it's the start of the cultural adaptability. Because what you need to realize is, when you are the helpless foreigner who doesn't understand anything, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, whatever. You can't let that get into your head. Because slowly, and the more time you spend, you're going to get better at the language, you're going to understand the people more, you're going to be able to use the chopsticks and not feel like an absolute idiot for not even being able to use chopsticks.
But the scenes so back to the time was our classmates.
Sure, we're in Germany in a lake.
The thing is, the reason is not like, oh, they've never traveled abroad, oh, they've never been exposed to the Western culture, oh, they can't speak English or German. Yes, we can't speak German, but we are able to communicate with them with English, and they are actually one of the top students, which also like did well in English, and they can speak pretty well. Some of them, they can communicate with really well, and also they have some foreigner friends in Shanghai, and they also love German culture. But the thing is, once they take out of their bubble, they've been thrown into this totally strange environment, and before they assume that they can fit in pretty well, everything is under control because they know how to communicate with those people, and they know how to use, and also they're very get used to their food, and they feel pretty confident about themselves. That boom, a simple invitation, a simple invite from just asking
you just
to
like
do
retreat.
something.
You retreat. Like into the field position.
Exactly, and then they feel like it's not what they expected. They expected they'll be invited to those kind of what they view like super like how is it, like attractive activities, like you're being invited to watch a football game or just hang out with people in the pubs or that kind of stuff they experience with their foreigner friends in Shanghai. But it turns out they think like that all those activities happen in the following days.
Right.
It just, to them, it's, I feel like it's, I don't know how they feel, but they definitely feel hopeless. Nothing's under control.
Nothing's under control.
And it has happened even if they know their culture well. They think they know their culture well and they can communicate with them. they still feel like imagine. Maybe they set up their own invisible like the barrier between them and those local high school kids. That's why they, from that day on, we are being more closer to the new friends we make from the local high school, but theirs just stay in the homestay home, which they barely communicate with them. They just keep silent all the way.
Right.
And they feel better once we leave Germany, start like a very touristic group around Europe, which I feel like it's pretty boring. But they feel like, oh, that's it.
I mean, it's important to, like, again, my first year, a semester in Sydney and interning in Hong Kong and a semester in Amsterdam, I hung out with my American friends.
Oh.
It's a process, and you can't, like, we're not saying if you don't go all in and dive in the deep end with all of this that you are unable in the realm of cultural adaptability. Like, the fact that you do leave the country and you are going somewhere, you are putting your toes in the water. But for me personally, like, to get to the point where I really am just like in the sense of being anywhere in the world in a different culture and different people, like, heart rate does not change. That has been me repeatedly going to a bus station, hopping on the next bus to a place I've never seen, finding a family who takes me in, and I end up staying in this family's house for a month on a border of just in a random corner of the world, repeatedly. This is not something I did one time. This is something I repeatedly did. Yeah. That's how you develop it. It's about putting in the hours of being unbelievably uncomfortable in different corners of the world. Yeah. That is the best metric to be able to develop this sense of cultural adaptability. At least, again, from like the mindset perspective. Of course, there is the technical knowledge that you're going to have to pick up, and you will. But from the idea of just mentally being able to do it as a starting point, it's just putting in the reps. Yeah. It's putting in the reps.
And also
of just oddity, pure oddity.
Exactly. I feel like, I mean, for now, we're definitely more like, I think we're serving our, like, the travel experience where we're actually like getting better at knowing how to get along with, or at least try to blend into local culture with, even if sometimes we both feel like, oh, we're never gonna do that. But again, in the next minute, we just rush in and we just go for it.
And it's always fun.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of a skill you can learn. Actually, but
openness to experience.
Yes.
Embracing the oddity of it.
Exactly. But the thing is, what I sense also is something maybe I had before, also with other people. I feel like a lot of people, even with some foreigner friends I've met before, we all like just over, like, how to say, like, just like we overthink that we might have a really strong cultural adaptability, because for me, language. For them, we are being travel a lot. We go to eat Thai food.
They went on a family vacation to Thailand at a resort, or they went vacationing in Italy with their family on a tour group. You know, that's one of the big wake up calls. Is if you think you physically being out of your own country is going to prepare you for a situation in which you are alone and you don't understand what's going on around you, you're sadly mistaken, right? That's why this idea of traveling and then just being a person living in a different place are almost not even related. The traveling, if you've traveled internationally, but you've gone to resorts and you're with your family and you're in this safe space, it has not prepared you for living abroad in the way that you think it has.
Exactly. That's why I feel like once people assume they have like a very high expectation for themselves, like we did before, like, oh, we're definitely be capable of like adapting to different culture, because we're able to, I mean, we're even open to their weird food. I mean, we have their food like every week back in our city, which is, yeah, which we can't say it's not a sign of openness. Yes, it can be seen as a part of the ability, because you are open to, just different variety of food. I mean, food is part of the culture as well. But again, I think as long as you're be alone or even with your friend, but once you really like just try to get out of your own social bubble and try to really get into deeper into the local culture, try to just like be one of them and try to hang out with them. I mean you were at that moment you were starting to feel like it's just totally, it's beyond your imagination, it's just something you're.
And that's when we enter the realm of assimilation, which is something we'll talk about another day, right?
Yeah.
But we are running out of daylight, and I think space on our memory card here, so we will begin to wrap it up. But I think what I would like to say before we shut this off is it's a long and difficult process to reach a high level of cultural adaptability. Exactly. It is not, again, even if I watched this before I started traveling, I think actually, I'm sorry if I if I discourage people from even trying to start. That's not the goal. But I do want to make it very clear that it is a very long process, and it is very miserable at points. But that does not mean you should not do it, because at the end of the day, doing difficult things is kind of what makes this whole life thing worth it, you know? And I wouldn't trade the last 5 or 6 years and how I've spent them for any other way, but that does not mean that it was happy times or a exciting or enjoyable experience in the conventional way. A lot of the stuff, I really went into it with the mindset of like, this is going to suck for the amount of time that I am doing it. But once I leave it and I'm back to a more comfortable situation, I will certainly be mentally tougher for it. I can look back on it, and also like it's like you need to be proud of yourself for putting yourself out there and putting yourself in these really difficult situations. And then what it just naturally does is it prepares you for the next one. And so I think that's kind of the highest point of cultural adaptability, is where you can understand that they could put you on a flight anywhere, and you understand that you're going to get there and it's going to be a little weird, but you're not fazed by it because you've done it so many times before. You know, with time you'll learn the language, with time you'll learn the customs, and you will get yourself back to a level of cultural competency that you had before in another world.
The other thing I've just to give the last thing, maybe just my 2 cents for wrap up everything. I feel like the cultural adaptability, besides what you said, I think it's pretty like really like a great kind of strategy for all people can apply to for their future travel, or maybe they want to have their own cultural experience. But I feel like for me, like the key for really knowing like cultural ability, which I feel like it why we say it's a pretty hard thing to do at the first time, also like to take a long process, because it's not something. I feel like it's not something like you can just simply be interpreted like, oh, it's just being open to the to new stuff. And it is, because you are being thrown up into like totally a brand new environment. But it's more about the ability to create, or being willing to step up, create new connections with those people in new places. I feel like that's the key.
Hours in uncomfortable situations in different corners of the world. That's the metric.
Yeah, but you need to start to connect with them.
100%.
Rather than just seeing them, since there's slightly different.
Yes,
from
no, I
us.
wasn't recommending just like sitting alone in those situations. Yes, the interactions is of
try
course
to connect to those people.
What drives the ability to have that quote unquote cultural adaptability. And this has been the episode on cultural adaptability. We had to clean all this up in the dark last time, and that was a little tough. So we're gonna wrap it up before dark here. But thank you for joining me on this afternoon here in Shanghai. It's always a great time.
Thank you for helping me and other people. We're struggling with this kind of understanding the cultural adaptability. I feel like we now have like clear overview about how it should be. But yeah, it takes time.
It does take
Yeah,
time.
we
It takes
also
time.
also for ourselves, we're still learning. We're
It's
still on the way.
100%. 100%.
So we should just grow together, like just trying to learn.
Should we go get dinner? Should we go get some
Yeah.
dinner? Should we maybe go to a weird place?
Yes, make new connections.
Let's go to a weird place and
We're
make
still on
new
the way.
connections. All right, let's get dinner.
Yeah.
All right, we will see you next time, where we
Yeah.
will talk about something that we'll have to figure out before we talk about it. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
So
Until next time.
until next time. All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.